What up?
What up? Hey, did your wife end up going?
No.
Okay.
No, she didn't.
Womp womp.
This is going to be my mild complaint. I didn't know about the tickets until like 2 hours before the game, so I was just like scrambling, and I
Right.
was like, "You want free tickets to a preseason game?" It is difficult to give away free tickets, even front row tickets, to a preseason game at the last second. I texted 5 different people, and they all were like, oh, "I'm at the World War II Museum." I was like, "You know what? That's probably a better time. Stay there."
Damn.
Anyway, so we're gonna come out. We're gonna talk about this preseason game. It's gonna be we haven't done this in a while, so I appreciate the people who are already in here. We're gonna just vamp for a couple minutes, but we're gonna do our typical. We're gonna go through stuff from the game, the preseason game that happened today. Then we're gonna use the last segment to answer a bunch of questions that have accumulated in the mailbag. I know that these are always fun to do. So if you have comments, questions, get them in there. Between segments, we'll go through and we'll star them, and we'll go back and get through as many as we can. We'll try to get to the earlier ones first. So if you get them in quickly, hopefully we can get to them. But I'm excited. I'm excited to talk preseason. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, we kind of talked about this a little bit just before popping on this. All in all, I would say it was a fun preseason game, definitely because of the way it ended. But yeah, great start, in the middle, and then awesome at the end.
Yeah, well, let's just start the podcast because I don't want to waste my my fun assessments on this non-potty version of the podcast. That's a weird way to phrase that. But Steve, you want to kind of hit the intro here, and then we can go into it.
Let's do it. We are inside Black and Gold preseason football edition in the book. Saints getting a 26-24 victory over the Chiefs in the Caesars Superdome. Jeff and I have been going at it since early this morning, talking Black and Gold and continuing on in tonight. That's why this is also a special edition of Inside Black and Gold, the Bourbon Cast. Cheers, everyone.
I don't technically have bourbon. I didn't have any bourbon, but it's a brown liquor. So
there you go.
But yeah, we're going to get through it. But no, you mentioned that before we came on that it was a fun game. I would disagree. It was a very fun start to the game. It was a very fun finish to the game. Everything in the middle, meh. But that's what the preseason is. So all you can ask for is an entertaining finish to the game. And by gosh, did we get one? I still can't wrap my head around why the Chiefs threw the ball in any way on that interception by Kyle Phillips. There's a trivia mark there. Fun fact. So, this was one of my first games on the sidelines. It's the first time that I've gotten a walk-off interview on the sidelines. And they typically only do the interviews with us if they win. It's kind of awkward to try to interview a post-game player after a loss because they're just angry. So typically we only get them if they win. So when the game goes like that and it's all of a sudden it's like, well, who do you want? Because it's like, the last 2 minutes, all of a sudden it changes. And initially we were like, oh, how about Jake Haener? It'd be a good interview. And so we were all getting ready to pull Jake Haener to the side and talk to him. And then Jake Haener just disappears. And it was like, well, he has to be there. We've been watching. He didn't walk by us, but he's just gone in this massive people. So we grabbed Kyle Phillips and talked to him. And then we looked over and like Jake Haener's like kneeling down. He's this tiny person. Between Jake Haener and Blake Grupe, you have the smallest pair of, game-winning Saints players that we probably ever have. Blake Grupe getting stopped by security because they think he's a fan wandering around on the field. But yeah, that was entertaining for sure.
Yeah, we kind of joked about it in the post-game show, too, when we saw that tweet go out about Groupie. And it was like, well, yeah, the security guard thought he was like a 20-year-old kid. He didn't even belong. Like, what are you doing here?
He is like a 20-year-old kid. They probably thought he was like a 15-year-old nephew of Derek Carr or something like that.
Yeah, didn't have credentials to prove that he was a player. And then, like, it was something, leaving the game, going out the player exit.
Yeah, he's gonna have to start carrying his ID around with him. I mean, he was wearing a uniform, so they must have thought he was just a kid who showed up in full uniform. Anyway, so we're gonna be going through this. We're gonna hit the 3 up, 3 down. Is something I posted. If you want to follow along, it's on wwl.com. Just to go through who I thought stood out, who I thought fell flat, and we're gonna kind of get Steve's takes alongside that. And then obviously that final segment, we're gonna go into the mailbag. But yeah, so the first player that I thought stood out, and I put this out on Twitter and I asked some people's suggestions. But to me, if I'm trying to figure out that first team offense, which looked fantastic, right? It feels like it happened 3 weeks ago at this point, because we've seen so much happen that does not involve this group of people. But that first team offense, 12 plays, 80 yards, didn't miss a beat. The only time you kind of got behind the chains, there was a false start and there was some awkwardness. Derek Carr took that on himself. But 3rd and 8, who'd he look to? Juwan Johnson, 11 yards. He just caught it, turned upfield, and I think he had 2 catches on that drive. Let's see. 29 yards total. Alvin Kamara had 21 yards receiving, 16 yards rushing. But Juwan, I feel like he's a guy that we've take for granted because he's been here several seasons already. But I think he is primed for a breakout. When you just see how confident he looks, you would assume that he and Derek Carr have been playing together their entire careers. And it just seems like that connection is already at such a high level. I don't know what the connection is going to be with Mike Thomas. He did catch a pass today. He's having trouble separating. I just don't know how effective he's going to be down the field. But I just think Juwan Johnson, he has a chance to have a huge year in the Saints offense.
The Cajun Cannon turns to me in the game and he goes, "Oh, Steve, did you do your fantasy football draft yet?" I'm like, "No, why?" He's like, "I'd be adding Juwan Johnson to that list." And you know what? Last season, I don't know. It's like, hey, is this Juwan's ceiling? It was a pretty good season he put together, but it seems like there could be even more there, which is really interesting. And yeah, definitely anxious to see more of Juwan in this connection. He seems to have built up with Derek Carr already. And man, I don't know. Derek Carr's had a magical connection in the past with past tight ends like a Darren Waller, even Foster Moreau, who's raved about him. So yeah, maybe there's even bigger and brighter things ahead. I thought, that first drive was so awesome. Just seeing them be able to move down the field methodically and then boom, putting the touchdown on the board. It was such a huge relief. Something, last season we went through these games. How many times you remember the team going downfield and actually putting up, forget even just a touchdown, points in general?
Right. Well, I do want to say we should pump the brakes slightly, because last preseason, we saw the Jameis Winston offense go out there and dominate the Chargers. Now, one thing to note about that preseason drive, it was the Chargers' second team against the Saints' first team. Whereas this was the Chiefs starting their starters. They started the starters on offense and on defense. And, I don't think we saw Pacheco. I think that might be the only Chiefs player that we didn't see that you would expect. But, I thought that the offense just looked really crisp today. And I did wonder going in, we talked about, I don't know if we talked about this on the pod, but the Friday practice, one thing that happened was Derek Carr threw a long touchdown to Chris Olave, and then he came off the field and he was yelling something along the lines of, "Oh, it's weird what happens when they don't know the script," right? And he was kind of hinting that the defense was getting tipped off on what the offense was running. And, I don't think he was going to go out and say it, but to me, that's him kind of saying like, one of the reasons that I haven't looked as good as I know I can be in this offense is because the defense is kind of cheating. And to his credit, he pointed out, it was like, it makes it more difficult. It makes me better. But I think that's one of the reasons we haven't been seeing him dominate the defense, because they know what to expect. And you saw what happened when they didn't know what to expect, when they weren't able to just read the mail, as he put it. So yeah, but just to close off that number on Juwan, you point out like what's the ceiling for him, and 42 catches, 508 yards. Like, he had a really good season, but those numbers are not exactly jumping off the page. 7 touchdowns is a big number. Right. But I think you could see like easily something in like the 60, 65 catch mark, 700 something yards, and then 7 touchdowns in that range. I think he's going to have a big year. He's going to be a very big part of this offense. So I think that's a good point, babe.
A thing I still laugh about too, and I know you can go way back to our early podcast before draft and free agency and everything, and it was like, oh, woe is me, what's going to happen at the tight end position? And now I've said it before, obviously, with Jimmy Graham in the mix, Foster Moreau, and Taysom Hill rounding out that foursome, I guess you could say, with Juwan. That's a hell of a group.
Oh, I agree. And so let's move on to another guy. So all of my stock up players are offensive players. And that's really not fair, because I thought the defense had a really good day. I thought Brian Brzee looked really good. I thought, Peyton Turner had a really solid showing against the second team offensive line, which is what I was hoping for. Marshawn Lattimore looked great. I think we got a pretty good indicator of Paulson Adebo being ahead in the CB2 race. And the biggest thing I will note is that the first team defense got on the field for 2 drives. The first team offense only got on the field for 1 drive. And so if the Saints were dedicated to making sure that that was an even split between Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor, they could have put Alontae out there across from Marshawn for that second drive. There was nothing stopping them from doing that other than themselves. And I think, to me, that's a pretty clear indicator that Paulson does have the inside track there.
Something I love, too, you talking about the first team defense. Man, they did have to face Patrick Mahomes, obviously, and coming out and being able to do the force the turnover on downs. That's huge right there for me. I love that. It was like that sent that message right away. And then, bam, they slam another touchdown. So, the beginning of the game was a ton of fun.
What's a more Andy Reid thing than a trick play on his first drive of the preseason?
Yeah,
did
why
not
not?
Work. Did not work. Also, Pat Mahomes' cheat meal was Mexican food, in case you wanted to try to shoehorn your way into that relationship. But
it seems like every day is a Mexican meal for me, so I'm cheating every day.
Yeah, you mentioned that second touchdown, and that's my next stock up player, a guy who I've been hard on, right?
Yeah.
You talk to people and they want to pull their punches and they don't want to use the word struggle. They don't want to use their, they want to, not undermine a guy. And I get it, but A.T. Perry has struggled. If you ask anybody who has watched Saints practices, he has struggled. And I don't know how well he's picking things up in meetings. All I know is what I'm watching, and I've seen him struggle with his hands. I've seen him drop passes. I've seen him not be crisp on routes. I've seen him get out physicaled. But today, I saw a completely different player. And this is what I was hoping for with AT, is that, sometimes some guys are just gamers. Some guys, when the lights get bright, they just lock in. And I think that's what you saw today. And it's really, really encouraging, because that touchdown pass from Jameis, that was the exact pass that I have been waiting to see him catch. Just go high point a ball. You're a giant. Go high point a ball. Go get it. When he scared me a little bit when he dove for the end zone and lost it. And I still think he's got to work on his hands. But just the attention to detail, the effort, the ability to get open. He caught 6 passes for 70 yards. That led the team by far. Yes, 6 catches on 6 targets, exactly. And this was, I talked to Jameis about this, and this is just a good example of, like, no one wants to use the word struggles, but, this is what Jameis had to say on the subject.
James, what did you see on that touchdown pass to A.T. Perry?
I just saw one-on-one, and I tried to put him in a good spot, and he went up there and made a heck of a grab.
And it's like, he's a guy who I think has had his struggles throughout camp. Is it just kind of a confidence-building moment for him?
Well, no, I don't know about him having struggles during camp. I just know that he's a young player. He loves football, so it was a great moment for him to show his capabilities, and he did just that.
What are some of the things that stand out about his game that he does well?
I just think he's a big target. He has a great release game. He has strong hands.
See, I don't know about the hands. But
no,
that's
one of the things you mentioned. Yeah, during practice, kind of like, you're writing your notes down, and like you said, we've seen a drop or whatever happened where he didn't come up with the grab, and you kind of like mumble to the person next to you, "Oh, I thought this was supposed to be the contested catch guy," and yeah, he's not even making the easy catch kind of grab. But yeah, the lights come on. I don't know. And AT showed up today, which was awesome to see, because of those struggles that we've witnessed in practice. It was like, okay, great. Like you said, the lights are on, and it's now time to shine. I love it.
I think he also is a very suited player for Jameis too. Like, I think that combination actually makes a lot of sense. Like, if I had to comp him to somebody, and this is an unfair comp because he's nowhere in the stratosphere of a Mike Evans, but just from a wingspan perspective, from the way you want him to play, I think that's probably who you would show him tape of, right? Like, if you're like, okay, AT, this is the type of game, this is what I want you to work on, is the stuff Mike Evans does. And we've seen Jameis have a lot of success with Mike Evans. That's the type of pass you would put up there for Mike Evans and say, okay, big guy, go get it.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of an interesting pairing. And I don't think it's a surprise that the second they got on the field together, it was a big play. But I think that's just, you can talk all day long about the expectations and what you want to see from a rookie. I just think confidence is everything at this stage. And if he needed a springboard for that, and I think he got it today.
Yeah, in the post-game show, I got to give out a game ball to somebody, and I did give it to A.T. Perry because the touchdown grab, what was it, 6 for 6 for 70 yards? Yeah, 70 yards, and the TD. I was like, that's a perfect day. Like you said, a huge confidence builder for a guy we've been pretty down on, and wait for him to show up. Got to love it.
No doubt. And so my next stock up player is actually to twofer because I couldn't decide between them. One is going to be Blake Groupie because, I don't even know if it's really fair to say stock up. I just wanted to give him credit because, we can pretend that a 31-yard kick with nothing on the line doesn't mean anything. That was a big kick for him. And I was talking to Tyler, our spotter, during the game, and I said, I feel bad for Blake Groupie because he has been out here warming up the entire second half. Like Will Lutz got the first half for the field goals. The second half was Blake Groupie's half to kick. And you could tell because of the way he was moving around, he was getting ready, he was hyped, and he could not stop moving. But then the offense just stopped. They didn't get any kicks. And even when they went down and tied it, or for that touchdown at the end, they did not kick the point after because you playing for overtime in the preseason should be, criminally illegal, right? Like you should be charged with a crime if you try to send a game to overtime in the preseason. And so they didn't, which is the right call. And we can get into the ill-fated 2-point conversion in the second segment here. But, Blake ended up getting his kick in the most unlikely way possible with that interception we talked about. And it was a 31-yard kick. His first kick in the NFL was a do or die, make this kick or we lose moment. And you have seen people whiff. Just go look at John Carney. And it's like, that was closer. It's not for nothing. And that stadium was actually pretty loud for a preseason game. If you don't think there's pressure on that kick, you're kidding yourself. So I give him a lot of credit. I think that was a big moment for him. I don't think it's going to make him any rosters. But, I think that is a big moment for any kicker. I mean, that's you walked off, right?
Walk him off, like you said. And who's the other one that shares the honor with him?
Ellis Merriweather, a guy who
running back.
I don't even know anyone could have named. I've known him for a little while, and he's a UMass guy. He didn't win a lot of games in college, right? Like he's just excited to be part of a win. And I picked him even before this quote occurred to me, and I'm going to play this quote on this podcast because we cannot play it over the air without bleeping it. But it's not anywhere near the kind of content that you're expecting. It's not, you hear Alvin Kamara and he's cursing constantly. That's not what this is, but it's way funnier. And he's kind of talking about Jake Haener and that final drive, which he was a huge part of. That last play for the touchdown was drawn up for him, for this UDFA running back who was a camp tryout. He was a rookie mini camp tryout, and he made the team. And he ran hard today, and he has an opportunity now because Kendre Miller went down with an injury. Who knows how long it's going to keep him out? It's a sprained knee, the same knee he dealt with an injury at TCU. So that's something to be concerned about. But he suddenly got an opportunity, and I think he took advantage of it today. But here is that Ellis quote.
Man, Jake is cool as a cucumber. I've been working with him since the summer, since rookie minicamp. When we went back home on break, we were FaceTiming each other every day, going over plays, going over the installs. And I mean, he that's a dude I ride for because he understands his job. Even though we got down, he threw a pick. His demeanor didn't change. It was, hey, got to drop your nuts and let's go and win the game. So defense did a great job stopping them boys, and then they gave us one more opportunity to go out there. And I mean, this is what you play for. I was at UMass, didn't get too many opportunities to be in a ball game. So just this being the first game too, like first introduction to NFL football, it's like, yeah, like I can get down with this, and I just want to keep growing and developing because I know it's still some things that I can work on and watch the film in a couple of days, and yeah.
Print the shirts. You guys gonna say print them up? Let's go. Get them ready.
He started saying it. He was like, I probably can't say this on TV. And then he was like, you know what? I'm just going for it. What do I have to lose? Anyway, I thought that was very funny. Because like I heard Doug Mouton. He was like, good line. We can't use it on TV. But yeah, no, I thought that moment was big for both those guys.
Yeah, definitely. Game-winning field goal. and what we saw in crunch time with Merriweather, especially too, it's like all of a sudden the pressure in the world's on you, knowing what's coming ahead for him with the uncertainty in a guy like Kendry Miller. I don't know how serious obviously it is. We're hoping that it's not bad, but yeah, when you're saying it's the same, the same knee he already had an issue with, it's a little concerning after a torn ACL.
Well, and Kirk Merritt didn't play. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. Alvin Kamara is going to be out the first 3 games of the season. So
Jamal Williams.
Right, Jamal Williams, and who else? Right now, it's Ellis Merriweather. And I don't know, maybe they do end up bringing in Kareem Hunt. Still hasn't signed anywhere. Maybe there's someone else on the heap they can bring in. But right now, he's the guy. And they're going to go out to LA and they're going to do this practices. I don't know who's going to. I mean, I don't think you're going to see Kendry Miller back for these practices. So, I mean, he's going to get all the work he can. But before we wrap up, I did have one honorable mention, and there was so many players on offense that I wanted to get to that I technically picked 5. But the other one's Keith Kirkwood, a guy that we have seen throughout camp, confident as anybody. You talk to him, I mean, he's just so confident. You can sense it. It's there. And one of the reasons he's confident is because he has a connection with Derek Carr that, you look back at players that Drew Brees had connections with that were more valuable on the Saints than they would be on any other team, for the sole reason that he could read Drew Brees' mind. He knew what he was going to do. I think a guy like Lance Moore stands out. Like, I don't know if Lance Moore has the career he does if he is not just in sync with Drew Brees to a level that most people couldn't even imagine, right? And I kind of feel like that's what's happening with Derek Carr and Keith Kirkwood. And we've seen it. He goes to him all the time. It's not a mirage. And when he found him in the back of the end zone for that touchdown, that was, that's just the end product of something that's been building. And this is what Derek Carr had to say about Keith Kirkwood when he was asked today.
Kirkwood was someone, we had 3 lifting groups, and we would always lift at that 6:30 group. And at 6 a.m., I'd be like, whoever wants to meet me there, I'll be there at 6 a.m. to, throw these new routes and these kind of things. And Keith was there every single time. And, after practice, I always run extra. Keith, as you guys see, he's always right there next to me, running extra with me. And if we don't see each other, we make sure that we check in. Did you do it? All that kind of stuff. And I think that it's his hard work and his determination. He's a veteran player. He understands what it takes. And I'm just really proud of him. To be able to get a touchdown, and I know it's a preseason game, but they still all feel good.
I'm going to tear up. That was beautiful, man.
Well, I mean, it's, it's not like you think of like reasons for someone to make a roster, right? And having the starting quarterback squarely in your corner and saying all of these things about you doesn't hurt. And like Keith Kirkwood, he's got an interesting skill set for a receiver. He's big, he's strong, he can block. And everyone who wants to see Traquan Smith not make this roster, you should be Keith Kirkwood fans, because I think if anyone's going to take his spot at being that kind of glue guy, that guy who's willing to do whatever it takes and block and all this and be able to do it, it's Keith. So, I think that was a big moment for him. It was a big moment for, Derek Carr's first touchdown. I know it was preseason, but it was his first time throwing a touchdown in the Superdome, and it was to Keith Kirkwood. So, I think that like he was an easy pick, even though he was technically my honorable mention.
No, that's great. Yeah, Keith's been a guy we've noticed that, like you said, confidence about him. And yeah, when we got to do that one-on-one interview with him that one day after training camp, you felt it. And it was kind of like that. I don't want to put on that same Alante Taylor swag, but I was like, man, I was looking at everybody going, who is this guy talking? Because it didn't sound like the same player we've seen in the past. I don't know, maybe going to Carolina away for 2 years was a good thing, because we talked about too, after, getting to chat with him at a touchdown club meeting, just how much things were different and how he appreciated New Orleans and the way the Saints way of doing things and couldn't wait to get back here and put the black and gold on again. He certainly looks like a guy right now, determined to make the best out of every opportunity. And yes, and that's what you want, those hungry dogs on your team.
Yeah, it was very clear to me that he wanted to be here. It wasn't just like, well, they're the team that would sign me. He wanted to come back, and he did. And so it's cool to see him get that moment. But all right, anything else you want to hit on the upside before we go to the downside?
I'm trying to think upside. To me, a guy like linebacker Ryan Connolly got a big shout out doing things on defense and also special teams. I thought he was very active and someone we've kind of talked about a little bit at practice, but man, you get so lost in the shuffle a lot of times. But yeah, when the lights came on, definitely was encouraged to see more of that guy.
Yeah, and there was turnovers today. Ugo Amadi came down with one. I do want to point out that Alontae Taylor tipped that ball up in the air, so that's a check in his column. He struggled in the slot. And one interesting question in that battle was like, how much are you weighing slot corner duties against outside corner duties? Because he did that touchdown in the second quarter there. He and Marcus May, I think, had a misconnection and miscommunication. But he was in the slot, and that's not the guy that you would typically say is the slot corner. So anyway, that's something. But I did think he made a really nice play on that ball, tipped it up in the air. It's the type of interception the Saints just did not find last season,
right?
And so I'm happy wherever they find them. So that's something. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about some of the stock down players. There aren't that many of them. I thought, even the second team guys, right? Like they struggled, but you're kind of splitting hairs here when you're talking about, your first team offense and defense look spectacular. So who are we going to complain about? So we're going to come back. We're going to talk about some guys that I did think struggled a little bit, but this is Inside Black and Gold. We're going to close this out with a mailbag. So if you have questions, comments, hot takes you want us to hit on, throw them in the chat wherever you're watching. We're live on Facebook and YouTube, and we will get to as many as we can in the back portion of this show. We got a lot of people in here, about 160 people watching. This is one of our higher viewed ones. I'm excited. We're back in football season, so it's great stuff. It's all great stuff, even though it's preseason. But all right, keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. If we seem a little punch drunk, it's because Steve and I started this morning hosting First Take at 8 a.m. It is now 9 p.m. We have gone all the way around the clock. And we are back. But so this is going to be the more negative segment. There's a few players that I think. So Steve, let's start with you. Was there anyone that stood out that you were just like, you expected a bit more out of than you saw today?
I guess it's going to be easy for me to pick on a guy that got hurt, but Kendry Miller, not really excited about anything. I saw 4 carries, 5 yards, and then the injury again, and hearing that it's the same knee, I'm kind of really bummed out about him right now and hoping for the best, obviously, to come back just because, it leaves an interesting and questionable running back situation if he's going to be gone for a long amount of time.
Yeah, and I'm not going to hold an injury against him, but when you're talking about kind of stock, right? When you're saying stock down,
right,
one of the things that he's now going to lose with this injury is the ability to improve, is the ability to progress in pass protection and all the things that you need a young running back to work on in his first offseason so that when you get to the games, you can trust him back there. And I'm assuming he's going to miss some time, even if it's not a major knee injury. He's going to be out. You got these joint practices coming up. That's when you're going to get a lot of that work in. He's not going to just get it. And so that's going to be a difficult climb for him now. Hopefully he can get back sooner than later. But I think that's a good point. It's, I think I was optimistic to see him impact these games and make himself into a guy that is really tough to keep off the field. And with the injury, which is the only injury really to report from this game, which I guess is a kind of a positive thing, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
I think, that's a tough one. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah, it was just the fact, like I said, you don't want to, bang on a guy that got injured. But like I said, before that, it was just nothing to write home about with what he did with his attempts.
I agree with that. And so, going back to my post here with the stock downs, my first stock down is a guy that I keep going back and forth on. I'm waffling just as much as he's waffling on what type of kick to make. It's Blake Gillikin. It's the punter. And man, I just, I think he's an excellent punter, but I don't know what happens. I almost think, he's been trying to incorporate the helicopter punts and stuff like this. I think he's trying to do too much. I think he just needs to focus on getting the kicks right because you look at that game and, it's a preseason game. The result doesn't really matter, but the Saints were dominating that game. They were up 17-0. The Chiefs had not done anything on offense. And the Saints go, they punt from in their own territory. I think they were punting from the 26. He punted the ball 24 yards. The Chiefs took over at the 50, immediately marched down, scored 4 plays later.
Made you think of the Cincinnati Bengals game.
Yeah, I mean, well, this wasn't the same situation. It wasn't late in the game, but it was like a good example of like you are flipping momentum in the complete wrong way. And it's like all you need to do is continue to make life difficult on them, make them go the long way. And instead, you're giving them a short field. And it's like, that's your job. That is your job, right? Like, I get it. You do a lot of things that don't get noticed. Like he's a holder. He does a lot of this stuff. He did make a couple really nice punts in that game. But your job is to punt the ball. And if 1 out of every 10 kicks is a complete shank, then you're not doing your job. And you're talking about a punter competition that he is in. I don't think he's going to lose it. I still don't. But, man, you got to be more consistent than that. And it's like, I get it. It's the first game. Maybe he's working out the kinks. But I've just seen this way too many times over the last few seasons to feel comfortable with it not rearing its head in big moments. And so my stock is down. I need to see him be more consistent the rest of the preseason, or I'm taking a really long look at Mr. Headley over there.
Yeah, I totally get that. Just because, that whole thing when the shank happened, you're kind of just like, oh, not again, kind of thing. Because we saw it some last year, and then sometimes in practice, and then that's just not gonna fly in the game situations because exactly how you mentioned it can flip the field so much and give the other team such an advantage. And look what happened. Touchdown, points are going to score off of it. And you don't want to dig your offense into a deeper hole. So I'd have to agree with you there with Gillikin. Unfortunately, it's kind of frustrating because there's the good days and the bad days, obviously. And I think the good days outweigh the bad more often than not. But the fact that we're still seeing the shanks, I don't know how you can correct that. You might be right. You mentioned the helicopter kick. Is he trying to do too much kind of thing? It's like, all right, just try to kick the ball normally.
My first indication was maybe he was trying to do a kick like that and he just missed it. And like, I guess if you're going to try it in a game, the preseason would be where I want you to work that out. Right. But at a certain point, it's like, I don't need a helicopter kick. I just need a good kick, And I think, I can't remember who was it that saved the punt down at like the 4? I'm blanking on it.
I'm trying to think too. Sorry.
It was a really good special teams play. I'll have to look it up. But there was a couple really nice punts, a couple really nice pins deep in their territory. So it wasn't all bad. But again, if I can't get consistency on special teams, it's a problem. And I just think there's too much variation. Like, anyway, I don't need to go in on Blake any more than I have, but he's a guy who I need to see step up.
For sure. Yeah, the special teams a huge deal. And it's just interesting that, you've got a guy like Lou Headley in camp right now. Seems like a lot of fun. We haven't really talked to him that much, but guys tatted up and looks like a rock star out there. And yes. I don't know. There's a very good chance he could unseat Gillikin if we start seeing shanks on a more regular basis. And you can't do that come game time. I'm sorry.
No. And again, it's like, okay, you're the quarterback. You're doing 90 different things. You throw one bad pass. I'm like, okay, I get it. You're a punter. You might punt 4 times a game, right? Like that, it's got to be consistent. And it's like, it's even worse by the fact that I look over, it's like, oh, Thomas Morstead's still kicking 5, and we couldn't keep him around, huh? Anyway, let's move on. The next 2 are defensive backs. And this is where I start to get kind of unfair because we're going down the list. We're talking about depth defensive backs, but I think that is where the real competition is. And so I'm going to be tough on these 2 guys because you have to separate people somehow. And Troy Pride, who I think has played pretty well throughout camp, he struggled today. There's no question about it. He missed a couple tackles. He got beat on a couple plays. He just, there were points that it was like, okay, you have a chance to make an impact and to make a statement for yourself. and he was not able to do that in this game. So, like, I think he'll bounce back. I actually like Troy Pride a lot. He's a guy who's really motivated. I just think that it's going to be really tough to make this roster as a cornerback, as a safety, and these little issues are going to crop up, and you're just going to have a really hard time, climbing that ladder. And I think he probably went down a few rungs with his performance today.
Definitely agree on that with Pride. Someone we've written down in a positive way at practices.
Yeah,
he's for doing good things. I'm seeing in our chat room too. You were mentioning now we're being the 3 up, 3 down, the 3 down part of this segment, and man, folks are piling on Alante from this game. I didn't think it was that horrible.
I mean, so I think, like you look at it, and Alante Taylor, slot cornerback star, is not a person that is going to be a guy. I think he's got to work on it. But yeah, like he looked real bad in the slot. And that touchdown where he kind of just got lost. But again, he's competing to be the outside starter. And I think when he was on the outside, he looked very good. He forced that interception. Ugo Amadi is going to be the one that gets credit for the interception, but right. Ugo caught it because Alante made a play on the ball and tipped it up in the air and created that turnover. So it wasn't all bad. But again, hey, you're preaching to the choir here, because I have said since day one that I think Paulson Adebo is going to win that job, and everyone told me I was crazy. So anyway, we can move on from that. The next player on my list, and this is a little unfair because it's based heavily on one play, and this is Smoke Monday. And I'm curious if you remember what I am talking about, which is, so he had one play where he just laid a huge hit, and it's like he's a hitter. He self-identifies as a hitter, so he's always going to go for the big hit. But on the very next play, there was a ball sent out to, I want to say his name was Nico Remigio. He actually was their leading receiver.
Yes, he sounded Italian to me.
4 catches, 71 yards. And one of those catches was up the right sideline. And Smoke Monday did what I can only describe as a Marcus Williams impression.
Yes.
And just he looked like he could have made a play on the ball, and at the very least tipped it up, kind of like Alante Taylor did. And instead, he just goes for the wipeout hit, lowers his head, lowers his shoulder, almost whiffs. He
don't want to see that.
He didn't whiff completely like Marcus did, but it was like a shot for shot replay of the Minnesota thing we don't need to talk about.
Yeah, I don't call it a miracle.
And oh God, it just makes me feel sick to my stomach just seeing it. And it's like, yeah, he's not going to miss the roster or make the roster based on one play, but you're going to see that on film, and that's going to be a tough one to explain. And he got on the field late. He didn't get a ton of early reps. I think he might be lower on the safety ladder than I initially thought. But yeah, that play alone was enough to make me a little queasy. So that's why he ended up on my stock down list.
Definitely a moment. I'm now from sidelines to being in studio, and I'm watching the game in the sports office with Abear, and we just looked at each other like, what? And he just goes to me, what the fuck? Yeah,
about that play?
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, you don't want to see that. Was that exactly like you just said? He's like, what is this, Marcus Williams?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something we don't want to see. I don't know if anyone's teaching that on the Saints, but it's got to stop immediately.
Yeah. Well, and it was made worse by the fact that he was in position. He played it well, right? All he needed to do was find the ball and go for it. I think he could have had an interception. I really do. I think he could have cut there, but instead he just defaulted to the hit. And even in today's NFL, that just doesn't make sense, right? Like, you're more likely to get a penalty than to do anything useful, which is like separate the player from the ball. You can't really do that anymore. So yeah, I mean, I still like Smoke Monday. I still think that he has a shot to make this roster, but the instincts there kind of give me pause a little bit.
We talked to him that one day after training camp, and he told us too. It's like, oh, I'm looking forward to hit somebody. I like to hit. Well, you got to get them sights set a little clearer, because you cannot do anything like that, please.
Well, they can't all be big hits. You can't just be going for big hits. I need you to make smart plays, right? It's you're being harsh about one play, but
it just brought up too many bad memories for sure. I totally get it there.
Right. All right. So We have people talking about Isaiah Foskey, and I don't have him on my list because my expectations for him were not particularly high. So his stock to me is the same because he struggled throughout camp. I think he's just, he's a guy who's going to have to learn. He's going to have to get better. But I don't think he did anything today that stunned me. But again, maybe it did for other people who haven't watched him throughout camp, which is fair. I'm not trying to brag or anything, but what you saw today was not out of the normal from what we have seen, and we've talked about it on this podcast. I think he's just a developmental guy right now, and I know people don't want to hear that about a second-round draft pick, but the good news is that the guys in front of him have been playing well. It's not like Isaiah Foskey is not getting on the field because because he just can't hack it around these other guys. The other guys are actually playing at a high level, so at least there's that. So that's why I'm not going to be overly harsh on Isaiah. It's his first career preseason game. He's getting acclimated to the NFL level. Let's give the guy time to struggle. And that kind of leads me into my next thing, which, unless you want to talk about Isaiah really quick.
No, I was just going to say that's the general thing from fans. I think they're aggravated with the fact that, wait a minute, what are you telling us that we've got a developmental defensive end that we drafted in the second round? It's like, what are we doing? We did that with Marcus Davenport in the first round and Peyton Turner too. What the hell is going on here?
Yeah. No, it's frustrating, but you know what? You gotta I get it, but I'm not gonna overreact right now. If this is the case late in the season, if this is the case next year, then yes, I will start to reach for it. But
to that point too, like we kind of mentioned this, it's like everybody's so quick to write off players after maybe a subpar first season, or maybe even they struggle in year two, or whatever it is, whatever happens to them with injuries. Them being slow to develop, whatever it is. What are we seeing right now out of a guy like Peyton Turner? Sure, it's not a finished product even close yet right now, but there's been huge positive strides. And for me to even say that a guy that's been terribly down on him, I think that's pretty big. And like you said, these guys, you can't just write them off immediately just because they might not be getting acclimated to this NFL level as soon as you want them to.
There was one third down play that Peyton Turner got home for a hit, and Lonnie Johnson came in and took advantage of it and knocked the ball away. And I was like, that's applause. Like, that is what you need to see. You need to see impact plays from the defensive line that set up the secondary, get the ball to come out, that take early, and then the defense can make a play because it's not on time anyway. No, so we have people in the chat saying Brian Brzee looked good. He did look good. One person said Isaiah Foskey's overthinking. Pammy Whammy. Great name. And I agree. I think that's true. I think he's a little overwhelmed by the NFL level right now, and that's normal. The next guy on my list also looked very overwhelmed until he didn't, which was Jake Haener. If you listen to this podcast, I have been trying my darndest to get everyone to pump the brakes just to
down.
He's gotten a ton of hype throughout the preseason, and it's been merited. He's been very good, but rookie quarterbacks, a mid-round rookie quarterback is not going to come out and light the league on fire. He's going to struggle, and that's how you learn. You don't learn by everything being easy. You learn by doing difficult things and getting better at those difficult things, right? Like, I'm teaching myself how to play piano. I sucked at it. I still kind of suck at it, but I'm at the point now where I can play songs that you might recognize, and that's a fast improvement for me. But if I just said, well, I guess I can't play piano because I couldn't play, whatever on day one, then I would never be a better piano player. Anyway, you get the idea. So a rookie quarterback in the NFL, he's going to struggle. You're going to have points where it's just going to be too fast. He's going to make mistakes like he did today. There was a miscommunication. I can't remember who he threw it behind, but he tried to throw a back shoulder against the wrong coverage, and it got picked off. And, it's a learning moment. It's a learning moment. There was actually one incompletion that I think if you watched on TV, you might think it was a really bad throw by him. It was Kawan Baker. And one of the issues with Kawan Baker is I just don't think he gets it at the NFL level. And there was a point where it's like, okay, Jake Haener made the right throw. Because if Kawan Baker continues on the line he is on and Jake throws it ahead of him, he is getting blown up. And so the only way that pass gets completed is if Kawan identifies that, kind of throttles down or sits in the open space, which is just something that receivers need to understand, and then kind of work back to the ball. And Jake put it in a spot where if he had done that, he could have gone back to it. But Kawan didn't identify it, and that's kind of that like, okay, the quarterbacks need to be on on the same page as the receivers, and they weren't. And so it might look like, oh, he just threw it behind him. He just made a bad throw. But like, so I think that's actually a sign of Jake Haener being ahead of the curve, and Kawan being a little behind the curve for a third-year pro. But I thought like that last drive by Jake is such a good example of like good NFL quarterbacks. Look at Tom Brady even. Look at that game in week 13. They can struggle the first 3 quarters, and then there's just it clicks, right? And they just have it. They have it when it counts. Pat Mahomes is a great example. Like, you've seen Pat Mahomes have terrible games, and then in crunch time he turns it on, and you could just see it. You could see it click. You could see him start to calculate, start to digest everything a little bit quicker, a step faster. And that last drive, he was just in command. And so, I don't want to say the stock is down on Jake Haener. I think the stock is exactly where I thought it was. But I think the stock for a lot of other people, it might have dropped because they might have been over hyping what his expectations were, the trajectory he was on, which I think is still good.
What do you mean, rookie of the year and league MVP, Jake Haener? What are you talking about?
Not quite yet. But so one thing that happened, so he obviously led them down for that touchdown, and then the 2-point conversion went awry. So I asked him what happened there, and this is what he had to say.
I was going to kill the play, and I was saying easy, and Who Dat Nation was a little loud, and he thought I said hut, and I was saying easy. So a little miscommunication. Obviously clean it up and make sure it doesn't happen in week 2 and week 3.
Well, guess what? Stock down, Who Dat Nation. What are you doing making all that noise for?
What are you talking about, stock down? It was so loud in a preseason game that it screwed up the hike. That's incredible.
But you're messing up the offense.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. It's just a timing issue. That is like, I think, if you've never been to a preseason game somewhere else, I think it's easy to lose perspective on how crazy it is that there's enough people in that building to make enough noise to impact a play in any way. At the fourth quarter of a preseason game, you could probably hear a pin drop at a lot of stadiums at that point, especially with the way the Saints offense struggled. Like, it's not like they saw that finish coming. The Saints offense did not score they scored 17 points in the first quarter and then did not score again until about 2 minutes left in the game. Why were so many fans still there? And I think, like, that's my takeaway from that was good on you, fans, for being too loud for Jake Haener. Actually, I'm sorry, being too loud for Alex Pihlstrom.
Yeah.
Not a good look for him.
I was going to say, so you obviously were at the stadium field level seeing all this unfold.
I was standing in the back of the end zone for that.
Okay, I was going to say, what was your take on the crowd for the game? It was really still hopping in the fourth quarter. That is impressive. It was very. I mean, I wouldn't say it was hopping the whole way, but there was enough people there still that when it got exciting, they got excited. Okay. And I mean, it was hot for the first quarter, which is what you expected. Yeah.
And then I kind of had to look around. I was like, wow, people are still here. And I think part of it was, a lot of people had just kind of like migrated from where they were sitting to the prime seats there at the end. But it was loud. And but no, I think Jake is really intriguing as a quarterback prospect. I really do. I think this is a redshirt year for him, and I'm okay. And that's okay.
Right.
You have Derek Carr this year. Like, if you get to a point where you're starting Jameis Winston and he's the backup, sure, I think he could be that. But like right now, I want him to focus on getting better and learning. And this is sorry. What I just find that funny with everything too, everybody wants to elevate Haener to number 2 already and trade Jameis Winston. What do you think you're getting for Jameis Winston on the market? I'm just curious. And how would that benefit Jake? Like, how would that make Jake better? It wouldn't. It wouldn't. And I prefer to let Jake focus on what Jake needs to focus on, which is, just improving, just getting steadily better. And being the QB2 isn't going to help him. I think it's just added pressure that is not going to help. Like, it's not, I don't know. Like, you get it. It's not, I don't see how that improves his stock at all. But, we can go on from there. Before we go, I do have to, I see Jerry G made a comment earlier on. I do agree with him. So I have to circle back to the 3 up. And I would put also, if not in the 3, in an honorable mention, along with Ryan Connolly for me. Got to add linebacker Zach Baun. Jerry G says, Zach Baun showed me something. And I agree with that. I was impressed with him tonight. Here, there was a comment here. Let's see if I can find it. which, oh man, I lost it.
Was the complete
But it was
opposite.
basically along the line of, oh, here it is. Yes, Zach Bond was actually used correctly.
Right. Okay.
Yes, he was right. That was my main takeaway. Was like, wow, you use Zach Bond as an on-the-ball linebacker. He got upfield, he rushed the passer, and he made a play. Crazy.
Good for
You know,
Zach.
stop trying to turn him into something he is not. You saw what it could be with Caden Ellis last year. You saw how, you saw how this defense can operate with a pass rush intensive linebacker. And I think he can be used in that role. I don't want to see him in coverage. I think that's the difference between Zach and Caden is Caden could cover. Caden was athletic enough to get downfield. And he was actually a lot better than I thought he was when he actually had to do it. I don't think Zach is that. You've seen him in practice. It just, he can't. You're asking for bad things. But in situations where you're getting after the passer and you were just sending him upfield, I like it. And so I'd like to see him used more often. But I agree. He had a good day.
Yeah, he was definitely one of those you came away with going, whoa, okay, show me something, dude. Because, yeah, training camp practices have not been, I won't say pretty, but they haven't been very eventful for him.
I agree. But all right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back and we're going to do a mailbag. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. We got over 200 people in here right now. It's exciting. I'm glad we are back doing football things. I'm Jeff Nowak. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. I'm still going to call it Twitter. I'm never going to call it X. So if you're wondering why I keep calling it Twitter, that is why. You can follow Steve Geller at Steve Geller WWL. You can follow the show at Saints_pod. And we're going to be right back with a bunch of questions. Stick around. All right, and we're back on Inside Black and Gold. It was a little longer of a break. I had to go through and hit some comments and questions. There's a few that are not so far questions, so I'm just going to kind of run through them so we can kind of get to information that people had asked about. The first one is, how is Shaheed? He just got here, or KD just got here. He's asking, how is Shaheed? Rashid Shaheed was there. He was on the sideline. We saw most of the players that have been out with injuries. The only one I did not spot was Traquan Smith. He may have been there and I didn't see him, but I saw DeMario, I saw Andres Pete. All these guys they're around the team, right? So if you think because they're not at practice, they're not there working, that's not correct. They're doing work. They're around the team, and they're just not getting on the field for practice. So
wait, Andres was there?
Was. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so that's going to be something. And Shaheed is interesting. He's a guy a lot of people are excited about. I'm excited about him. And he's dealing with that groin injury. Those, soft tissue injuries are a pain in the ass. So this one's a pain in the groin. But yeah, it's not believed to be serious, but it's frustrating. And so we'll have to see. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. DeMario's dealing with that calf. Andres is dealing with the quad. Kirk Merritt is dealing with the hamstring. He was there as well. So yeah, there's a few guys who I think you're just playing it safe with right now. And yeah, so I don't think we need to get too much into the weeds on that.
No, like you said, DA mentioned to us, and he's been pretty good with his injuries, maybe a little too forthcoming at times, but he did believe that none of these were going to be anything too serious, and I'm hoping that's true. And yes, them being at the game and actually visible, definitely a positive.
So Drew C is asking what player we're talking about. I believe this is in the Smoke Monday play. It was later in the game. It was the fourth quarter. I would say it was probably about 8 minutes left. It was deep in Chiefs territory. Like they completed a pass to, I want to say, the 29-yard line, and that's where the quote unquote tackle was. But the funny thing is, you get credit with the tackle on that play, and it was just flashbacks. But anyway, that's the play we're talking about. Drew Devin Sonier also points out, Smoke Monday is basically a rookie. You're not wrong. He missed the entire preseason last year. He didn't play in a preseason game. He and DeMarco Jackson, another guy I think had a pretty good day. He had a penalty early on, but I think he bounced back well. But Smoke is basically a rookie, right? Like in terms of time on task, he's basically a rookie. So I agree with that.
To me, it was just totally a guy. Listen, I'm trying to give this huge highlight hit stick kind of play, create the turnover, and have a big outing for myself kind of deal instead of just wrapping up and making the short tackle.
100%, I agree with that. Like that's exactly what happened.
I'm gonna make some kind of huge highlight.
Yeah. Don Tomasino says blitz Smoke if he wants to hit. We have actually seen him get blitzed a lot in camp. He's good at it. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that he does have some upside as a blitzing safety. Let's see. So here's one, and a few people have commented this, so let's just get into it. It says, Fammy Whammy says, Jameis definitely looked good. I will say Jameis looked good at points, right? That first drive when he hit A.T. Perry over the top, that was a great throw. But then, one of the issues that I have with Jameis, and it's like, once a team feels like they can blitz you when you have no answer for it, it's a really tough life to lead as a quarterback because you look at a guy like Tom Brady, and one of the reasons you can't blitz him is because every time you blitz him, he will make you pay from wherever the blitz came from. He knows it's coming. He identifies it. He gets the ball out there. And I just don't see Jameis do that enough. And there's times where it's like, they're going to send him. Like, they blitz like 4 times in a row. Like, the blitz is coming, and you just got to identify the hot route and get it out fast because there's no one there to cover that guy. That guy blitzed. So that's what frustrates me. And that's when the Saints offense bogged down in the second and third quarter, or in the second quarter rather, because he didn't play the third quarter. The second quarter was just blitz after blitz after blitz, and he was getting teed off on. And, one of the reasons he's dealt with injuries the last couple of seasons, not necessarily 2021, but definitely last year's, he's getting teed off on. And, you got to be better. You got to protect yourself. And I just, I think Jameis did look good at points, but then the blitzes came and I don't think he handled them very well. We asked Dennis Allen about it, and he wouldn't go in on it. He said he wanted to see the tape first, because I think there is an element of, okay, this is on the offensive line, but it's also got to be on the guy who sets the protections. And that's my one gripe about Jameis, and it's been the same gripe as last year, is when he gets blitzed, I don't think he handles it well.
The biggest positive for me in this game about Jameis was at least he looked healthy, because I think we saw 2 or 3 times when he took off and scrambled, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, he moved. He needs to learn how to slide.
Oh, the slide is not pretty at all. No. I was like, he's going to hurt him. I was like, you're going to hurt your knee doing that. What's going on?
Well, kind of a stumble. I get that. He was moving. He looks fast, right? He did. He got out and scrambled a few times, and he picked up serious yardage. But it was at the end. It was like, I'm just going to kind of go down, Yeah,
it was definitely not pretty. I was like, oh my God, did he hurt himself?
I think it is kind of a combination of like, okay, I need to get down, but also I don't want to sacrifice the yardage. Like you saw Pat Mahomes slide, and they didn't get the first down,
right?
Because he slid, and the ball gets marked where the slide starts, not where it ends. And so it was a 4th and short, and that's where they got stopped on 4th down. So if you can say anything for the way Jameis slides, it's that he's getting every ounce of that yardage. But it does, it's like, oh gosh, because eventually you're going to get your head taken off, because you don't get protected like when you go down like that, right? Like if a player goes to the ground with you and hits you, you don't get the protections of a sliding quarterback when you kind of just stumble to the ground. So, I think you probably still would get the benefit of that call in some instances if someone's just trying to clean you out. But yeah, it's you got to be better than that. He played baseball. Like, he can slide. I don't understand it.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. You should be used to that. And that does not look like a baseball slide at all.
It's so odd. But no, like you said, I think it's a great point. He's moving around really well. It was something that I don't think, one of the reasons he had struggles last year early, and especially protecting himself he just wasn't moving as well because he had the brace on. He was still coming back. I think what you're seeing this year is he's very much athletically back where he needs to be. So that's a good sign for him.
Go Jameis.
Speaking of another guy, so Branded says Kamara was running like he'd been shot out of a cannon. Kamara looks really, really fresh. You're not going to see him for the first 3 weeks, but I fully expect week 4 and beyond, you're going to see a very, very high level version of Alvin. And we saw today, that opening drive, what was that? 37 yards of it, 37 of those 80 yards, half of the yards on that drive were Alvin, and 2 of them were runs, 2 of them were catches. And, I think one of the things that is very clear this year, and we saw it, is they're going to be looking to get him the ball in space. And I don't know why they stopped, but that's such a huge part of the Saints offense when it's working. And we saw it today, and I think we're going to keep seeing it.
It's nice when you have like that felony, battery case no longer looming over you kind of deal. And we saw at that press conference the day when the suspension was handed down afterwards, actually. But even then, when he spoke to us, you could tell that Alvin was different coming in to this season, just carrying the weight of that case on him. And yet totally looking forward to seeing Mr. The Matrix back this season, putting on those moves.
Agreed. Demetrius Ramsey says Bobby Hebert is the one that got everyone believing he's the next Breeze. He's talking about Jake Haener. That's fair. Bobby. He's when I say pump the brakes, I'm mostly talking about Bobby.
I'll say at least Bobby's not trying to put him as the number 2 guy yet, though, but he has been excited over, obviously, a young quarterback that's probably been the best prospect we've seen in here for years.
Bobby is a man of hyperbole, and that's fine. I'm for it. And we are all part of this. Everyone who goes at the camp practice and keeps reporting about how fantastic
it looks amazing.
And he does look really good, but I think you just have to always kind of couch it in, be realistic about what your expectations are. He looks a heck of a lot better than Ian Book did at any point. So take that for what it is.
Plus, there's not times at the training camp practice we're seeing Jake Haener going up the first team defense. Well, I'll say that it wasn't the first team defense for the Chiefs either tonight, but that's a whole nother story. Haener, though, still a promising prospect, even though a shaky preseason game, but is a rookie. That's what we should expect.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it was a little fast for him early on, and, it'll slow down. Don Tomasino says, I got to say, May looked good. I think, maybe he's fully recovered from the knee. I think he did. I think Marcus May looks like a much more confident player right now, than he did this time last year. And so, he was coming back from, it wasn't a knee, it was an Achilles injury. But he did look like he was a little tentative last year. And I think it was partially just kind of getting the explosion back, getting comfortable, making sure he felt confident in that Achilles, but also like learning a new defense. I think as a safety, it takes a little bit of time. We saw Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins struggle as a new pairing early in that grouping, right? I think that was the 2020 season, and they got much better as the season went on. In the next 2 years, they were fantastic, and the second year. But this pairing of Tyron and Marcus May, I think you expected it to gel a little quicker than it did. But no, I think you are seeing now, like, everyone's a little more comfortable in what they're being asked to do, and Marcus May's playing a lot faster, I think.
Yeah, I think there was a key play on a 3rd down where he broke up a pass, and it was like, all right, it was a great play kind of deal. And like, you said, you're finally seeing him not just recovered, but being fully recovered, I guess you would say, and football ready, I guess. Not just ready injury wise, but also having put in the time in rehab to get everything strengthened and back to 100%.
I agree with that. So we can go on to another player who, we saw sparingly today, but Jamaica Slater says Michael Thomas only played the first drive, 2 balls thrown his way. He caught 1 for 16 yards. So he's working his way back. The other one was kind of a fade in the end zone that was a little too high. Yeah. So Mike, it's hard to gauge with Mike because Mike is always going to be elite at making catches in traffic and fighting for balls. And there's a skill set there by itself that is valuable to this team. But I do think that he is a lot more limited, at least right now, than I remember him being. Not necessarily last year. I think he looks a lot like he did last year, but like I don't know if he has that 2019 burst in him where he's able to create separation in a phone booth. Like he's going to be a very important piece on this roster in that you need a first down. You can go to him in traffic and you know that he's going to fight and he's going to probably make that catch. He's going to win it a lot more often than he loses it. But I don't know if you can trust him to create separation. And maybe as the season goes on, he gets a little bit looser, he gets a little bit quicker, he gets a little bit, more elusive. But it's tough for me to point to him and be like, that's the number one wide receiver on this team.
What's amazing, and I'm surprised that nobody's been blowing up who looks like has been the number one wide receiver in Chris Olave. Obviously, just one target today in that drop, and it was like, oh, come on, man.
15 players caught passes in this game.
Nothing from Olave.
The guy who has been relentlessly hyped up for good reason all throughout camp did not have a catch. He did have a target. He should have caught it. He dropped it.
Right.
I'm not saying like, I think we all know who Chris Olave is. I'm not worried about it, but it is kind of funny. Like Adam Prentice caught a ball. Jake Vargas caught a ball. Chris Olave.
Yeah, shut out for the night. And yeah, that was obviously, you don't want to see that either. The dropsies from him. Unfortunately, they never got another target on him in a game, but overall in training camp, he's definitely been one of the major highlights along with Marshawn.
Randall Alfrecht asks, who's the number 2 receiver on this team? He says, I wouldn't say Michael Thomas, so I guess you're indicating that Chris Olave is the number 1 wide receiver. I mean, I guess it depends how you're asking. If you're talking about in terms of production,
right,
then probably Jawan. In terms of, I expect him to be the number 2 in yards and probably touchdowns. Mike, if you're talking about in terms of first downs, probably is number 1. So I don't know. I think you're talking about roles more so than, number 1, number 2, number 3. I think he's going to be a big contributor to this offense. He's an important piece. But if you're looking at it and saying, wow, can he get back to that 2019 form? I just don't think so. And that's fine. Like there's a reason that's the most catches in NFL history, right? Like you're not going to get, like he might think he's going to get there. Yeah, I mean, whatever. But I think I'm okay with where Mike is. But I think, again, it's like you need to be realistic about the expectations for him.
Sure. And I do think he is the number 2 guy to me. He might not be even he's not going to be number 1 in catches, I don't think, or yardage. But, hey, man, there's definitely a good chance Mike T ends up being the receiving leaders in touchdowns.
Definitely not yardage. I could see a scenario where he leads in catches, but
sure,
his catch average is going to be lower. Like Chris Olave is probably going to average 18 yards a catch, right? So he could catch 50 balls, and he would probably outpace Mike with 70. But yeah, so it's something to watch. But I agree with that. All right, let's see. We got a few new in here, so got to get to the bottom. Says Kamara should have been running like that in Vegas.
Very well played, Reginald. Well played.
Yeah.
Cheers to that.
Lame ASF says, I can see Kamara catching 65 to 70 passes. I hope so. I hope we get back to 81. I hope he catches exactly 81.
Now that would be something, because that means then, all around he's having a great year since he was super productive. All 3 of those seasons, obviously.
Elvish Freshly asks, is Pete getting his job back? You
got to be at work to get the job back.
One thing that Derek Carr talked about today was having his entire first team offensive line on the field. And so I think Derek Carr sees James Hurst as his starting left guard because, he was talking about how great it was and how good of a job they did. And, we can talk about a position battle, but if you're not on the field to battle for it, is it really a position battle? So no, I don't think that Pete is getting his job back. I've been kind of firm on this from the start. If Hurst gets hurt, if like he loses that job for some reason, then I think Pete is right there. But I think that's James Hurst's job.
Yeah, the reliability that you have with Hurst and his experience, to me, totally trumps what you get out of Andrews Pete, who can be hurt any single minute.
Rich Rising asks, isn't the Super Bowl in Vegas? It is. And I think it's Fate Loves Irony, technically, but we're good. We got that. We get same
Hey,
same
Cam
thing.
Jordan says that's the goal, man. Let's bring Derek back.
Did you see the clip of Cam Jordan like rolling up? You didn't?
I think unbelievable, because if I did that, I'm definitely going to the hospital.
It's crazy. And you could see, so he pointed this out. I didn't even look at it, but Colin Saunders is like doing the worm and getting up. And it's like, who are these people? I guess they are dancing pandas or whatever he called them.
Yes, I love it.
So Ryan McGee wanted to see Foster Moreau get some passes and Kirk Merritt at running back. Yeah, it's one of the few people who didn't, get really into the action was Foster Moreau. Kirk Merritt's hurt. So, yeah, I mean, that was never going to happen. But, yeah, Foster really didn't have much of an impact today.
No, Foster, we might be getting ready for that pool volleyball game. I don't know.
He had to skim the pool.
Yeah.
All right. So here's one more. KD says Turner locking down that D2 spot. I mean, I disagree with that. I think Carl is pretty entrenched in that role right now. I think Peyton is playing well, and I think he's going to get himself snaps. He's going to get on the field, and I think he's going to be productive. But I think that's very much going to be a rotation. I don't think either of them is going to be like, wow, okay, that's the guy at the defensive end spot across from Cam. And I think that's okay. You don't need a guy to play 95% of the snaps. That's just Cam being a nut job and being able to do it. But I think you're very fine with a guy like Peyton Turner getting in for 50% of the snaps as long as he is productive on those snaps. And for a guy who struggled to be healthy the first 2 years of his career, I'm okay with that. Like I would like to see him on the field, and then we can worry about how many snaps he's playing.
To me, yeah, Turner's come into this season knowing health has been an issue. I don't know what it is, even maybe his attitude or effort in the past, but he's coming fully this season looking a guy going, you know what? I want that number 2 job opposite Cam Jordan. I believe that from him right now because he's definitely been showing it. But yeah, Grando, I love what Carl Granderson's been doing for me. That progression we've seen from him every single season. You want that out of a player. And yeah, definitely excited to see if he can keep pushing that. But I would put Granderson still slightly ahead of Turner, but Turner is definitely right there with him.
Agreed. And one more comment here we'll get to, and then we can wrap this up. St. John Butlers is trying not to get too excited, but this team could give us a fun season. And, yeah, it's tough because you don't want to overreact to anything you see in the preseason. You don't, the offense looked fantastic on that opening drive. The defense looked fantastic on those 2 drives they were on the field, the first team. And, you just kind of go with it and say, okay, that's the first step successfully completed, right? And now you're going to go from there. But, I was a little worried we would see the offense come out and just look stale. And, that was the big relief for me because we've seen Derek Carr struggle. And that's why when he talked about how the defense knows the script, that kind of crystallized it for me because, he has struggled at points, but I do think he's right. I think that's one of the reasons that there's no separation, that there's such tight windows to throw to is because the defense, when it's going against its own offense, has a little bit of a leg up, especially for a quarterback who's picking it up, who's installing it all at the base level.
I thought it was interesting too. One day at camp 2 afterwards, he said, sometimes I know it might not be the most ideal situation or something, but he's like, now's the time to try things. So I'm just going to let it fly kind of deal. So I respect that too in the training camps to realize sometimes, all right, let me just try and make a play for the hell of it here.
He's okay with things not going perfectly well. And so you might look at it and be like, well, okay, this ball hit the ground. It's like, yeah, but he's throwing it to see what happens. Right. And, I think that's when you have to do that because you don't want to do that in a game.
Right. I'm not going to chance it and risk the turnover here. But you know what? In practice, what the heck? Let's let it rip.
Yeah, let's see what they got. Let's see how Jawan Johnson reacts to this ball. Let's see how Chris Olave reacts to this ball. Can he go up and get it? I think he phrased it as asking questions. He's asking a lot of questions in practice, and he's just interested in finding out the answers. And, I think we did see him look really good today. And I don't know exactly what to expect from him this season, but today got me excited about it. I can see – the optimism was really heavy early on, and I'm starting to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit because I think when you see how they played today and you see the way the offense and the defense can complement each other, I mean, this is the best team in the NFC South. The most well-rounded team. It's the only one with a quarterback that I feel like is ready to win right now. It's the only one with competitive offensive and defensive units, right? Like the Panthers have a really good defense, I think, but their offense is questionable. They have a young quarterback. The Bucks have a good defense, I think, but their offense has Baker Mayfield. And then the Falcons, right? Like Desmond Ridder and, a lot of pieces. I don't know what they're going to look like on offense. I'm sure they're going to run the ball a lot. But I just don't see a ton of question marks all up and down the Saints roster right now. And that's very nice to see. And gosh, a playoff season, even a 10-win season would be so fantastic. And that's why, like, you talk about trying not to get too excited. It's like, that's my bar right now. Can they get to double-digit wins?
I think it's a must. I put it as a must this season for sure.
But, like, that's still 7 losses, right? Like, that means you won 3 more games than you lost, which right now sounds great. But if, like those last few Breeze seasons, like 10-7, what happened, So we've kind of dropped. My bar has been lowered over the last few years.
From NOLA.com and the Times Picayune, Jeff Duncan sent us all, our season predictions kind of deal. And I said in my write-up to him, I really have a hard time going through this schedule that we've all talked about, how it looks so favorable for the Saints. Yeah, you really go through it game by game, and it's hard to come up with losses. And I like that part of it, obviously, a lot. And I expect there to be bumps in the road along the way. But to me, double digits with this schedule, with this talent is a must. And I got them winning 11 games this season. I put it at
10 because I'm just trying not to be overly,
I'm drinking the Kool-Aid.
11 and 10. It's right there.
Sure.
It's hard to come up with 8 losses. It's hard to come up with 7. But I just think there's kind of a standard deviation there. There's injuries that are going to happen. There's going to be some struggles. But maybe my hope is that we don't spend all year talking about Pete Carmichael. That's my hope. Think we can do that?
After that first drive, man, everything looks smooth as silk. So we love that. Let's keep that going.
I agree. But all right, let's wrap this up. Thanks everyone for being in here. There's a lot of people, a lot of comments. I had a good time. Hope you did too. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. My co-host, as always, Steve Geller. He's the real trooper. I just hung out on the sideline. He hosted an entire show after the game. We've both been at this for about 14 hours now.
But you know what, Jeff? Seeing all these folks hanging out with us right now is awesome, and we might have to become a late night podcast.
Right. Well, it's like, yeah, it makes it fun because I know people really enjoy it and they want to talk about it, and so like I don't mind doing it. These are the days I don't mind being 14-hour days, although it makes me scared about what a regular season game is going to be if these are 14-hour days. But hey, we'll make it through. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. If you haven't left us a rating on Apple Podcasts, please do that. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. Feedback, I love it, even if it's criticism. I live on it. I need it. Tell me how much I suck. But do it in a way that I can find out about it, not just to your relatives over the dinner table. Like, can you see that a-hole? Anyway, so let's do that. But yeah, we'll be back this week. I'll be headed out to LA for the joint practices. I am excited about that. I'll be headed out on
cooler
Wednesday.
Temperatures.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so excited for not this, anything but this. Yeah. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be out there Thursday, Friday, and then Sunday they're going to face the Chargers. So I'm not sure what our schedule is going to look like from a podcast perspective, but we'll figure it out. We'll get you an episode or two. And I don't know, it's going to be tougher to do the post game. So maybe we'll do it on Monday. Because it's a later start. I think the
late game, and then you'll be flying back, right?
What is it? 8 p.m. locally?
6 p.m. I think local.
Okay, so it's 4 p.m. out in LA.
Let me double check right now. I think it's a 6 o'clock Central kickoff.
Then that would be 4. Either way, it's a later start, so that's going to make a live chat a little tougher.
6:05. Yep.
We'll figure it out. But anyway, thanks everyone for listening. As always, follow me at Jeff_Nowak. Follow him at Steve Geller. WWL. Follow the show at Saints_pod. Check out the latest Saints content over at WWL.com and always listen to Sports Talk 4 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. Steve's on there I'm on there on Fridays most weeks, at least for now, until the season starts, and then you get to listen to Mike Haas and Deuce McAllister. That must be better. But check that out. WWL AM 870 FM 105.3, and always on the free Odyssey app. We're on there too, so download that and subscribe to Inside Black and Gold. You can do it. But all right, this out has lasted way too long. Steve, you have any parting words?
Just want to see the Saints, like Cam Jordan always says, just keep stacking those levels. I love it.
Stack.
Let's do it, Saints.
All right.
Got a good feeling.
Who dat? Go Saints.
Need more.